we know he is what he is.
A winner.
He's a winner. And now I will read I wrote a little thing. I'm not even going to look at you. I'm going to look at him because I'm talking to him. Being doesn't reside in identity, but instead arrives in relation. That's a quote from Kevin Quashie. He'll be here next week. Come. Being or aliveness is what you bring to people and to words. In your presence, we are a little closer to laughter, to our bodies, to our aspirational selves, to everything that's vulnerable, and to everything that wins. You pull truth forward with tenderness and force. Your poems react as we react. In your presence, they are held as you hold. And I know that you hold because at 3 a.m. when I text you, which I do, sorry. And I always want to believe that your phone is off, but it never is. I just want, maybe when I'm texting you, I don't tell you this, but since I have the public behind me, I just want to say how much you are loved by me. It was before, it is now, and it is evermore. Thank you for being here.
Hi, can everybody hear me just fine? I thank you so much, Claudia, for that introduction. Y'all might not know this, but Claudia was my teacher. So I feel, and I felt this looking at her quilt downstairs. I don't know if everyone's seen everything. Everything about my life has, since meeting her, been about figuring out how to make it so that I am doing what I want and need to do for myself, and the ways in which that intersects my entirety as a gift. Do y'all know what I mean? And one example of the way that Claudia has done that is that even in the introduction here, she was telling you what you can do next week. And she's created, along with John and all of these wonderful people from this gallery, this opportunity for you to have something to do for the next few weeks and weeks of your life. I think that's so amazing. Isn't that great? That's so nice. And I just want to be like her. Do y'all know what I mean? And I want my work to move in the world the way her work moves in the world. And I'm grateful for Claudia Rankine, the person and the friend, but also for Claudia Rankine, the poet, whose work changes my life and who gives me something to look forward to. So big thank you to everyone for being here. The flyer said that I should read new poems, that I will read new poems, which really bothered me because it means I can't hide behind my last book anymore for this particular reading. So you're going to hear poems that I've never read aloud before. And because I am in Berlin, I will do a little bit of introduction for some poems here and there. I realized trying to put this reading together that much of my work pulls from American history, and in particular Black American culture, in ways that I might need to inform you of before reading the poem. And if there's nothing else I'm forgetting, hey Logan, if there's nothing else, hi, everybody, y'all can sit, is somebody sitting next to an empty seat?
Why don't we take the couch and make another row?
Yeah, y'all can sit here. They don't want to sit there.
Yes. No, just move the couch.
Just move it like there.
Yeah.
Thank you. I thought they were gonna make me do it. I'm like, wow. like, how much work do I gotta? Y'all not paying that much. Thank you. Okay. Sorry this took so long, but I got pulled over after coming out of the lot at Rossman's, where I stopped for lip balm, just beyond what I swear was yellow, by a cop with one eye. He didn't look like me, but still became my father, the first one-eyed man I ever met. I see him where something is missing. I do not mean to hurt anyone. I am good, a good driver, focused. I know how to use my mirrors. I obey more laws than the president. My dad asked me the rush, and if I even knew I ran the light. You probably think I started crying to get out of a ticket, but you're wrong about me. I'd never run a red. I started crying because law enforcement had gotten so bad they recruited my dad, and his soul had gotten so dark he sold it to the state. For once, the man didn't ask me if I wanted something to cry for. He gave me a warning, said I'd probably hyperventilate if he wrote me a ticket, and he didn't want to deal with a medic today. I knew he wasn't my dad when I got the warning. He couldn't have looked like me. He was white. My father wasn't exactly a drunk, but he was a one-eyed driver of a father, both wild and single-minded. The man once told me he ain't got 6 centimeters of a smile for no police. After the cop let me go for crying, I sped like a criminal who steals to avoid long lines. And now I'm here with no more delays, and I am ready to kiss you. This next poem involves a television show from the late sitcom from the late 70s and early 80s called The Jeffersons. The leading lady of The Jeffersons was a woman named Isabel Sanford, who played Louise Jefferson and who had a very distinctive voice, such that when she said her husband's name, it always sounded like George. The other thing that you may need to know is that the 1980s and 90s were a very violent time of gang violence in the United States. And there were many gangs in actuality, but there were two major gangs known as the Crips and the Bloods who were associated with the colors blue and red, respectively. Sitcom. A rabbit tried to kill Louise once when I was a kid. I'm saying Louise now, but I'd have said Miss Louise then, as she appeared on our screens once a week wearing blues I haven't seen since. Her long hair curled, combed out, and pushed up into a volume so thick you felt both the power of an afro and the requirement of a relaxer on a woman rounder than most of her penthouse neighbors, hair that wouldn't move no matter how much she shook when she yelled at her husband or when trapped by a man dressed as a rabbit who wielded a snub-nosed .38 special we thought scary before we knew what an AR-15 could do. Miss Louise never sang, but she had a voice that left you wondering how singing might sound on her. She was that beautiful and dark. They had a grown son. She wasn't a young woman. By the time I saw the Halloween rerun, the youngest men in my hometown had organized themselves into colors, red and blue. They were patriots. Like patriots, they'd shoot. And they'd shoot each other too. They'd shoot you if you accidentally scuffed their shoes at a club or a concert. They'd shoot driving by from their cars into houses and parks. They'd sell you something so good you'd sell our TV to get more of it. And I cannot say I didn't love them. They killed my first girlfriend, a stray bullet meant from her brother, and I loved them. They killed my cousin, but some of them were my other cousins, and I still loved us in all my fear of our gold teeth and oversized dickies. They'd kill me today, yet remain a problem I mean to solve. I'm grown now. I know Louise was the star of the show, the leading lady. No writer would kill her off on a sitcom. Murder is meant for real life. Anybody can get a gun, but nobody kills Louise Jefferson. There is a place where black people don't die, a deluxe apartment in the sky. All week I worried about the next episode. Mornings I dressed myself and my little sister, making sure we wore nothing that looked like the flag. And when the appointed night fell, the jokes were still funny. The rabbit apprehended. The white rabbit didn't murder the black lady. No, not on TV. The ground. I think my dad thinks he apologized to me today in my backyard. We were on our knees. We were not praying, though I understand us as men dedicated to the ground in a religious way. Behind my house, on our four knees, not praying but digging, we searched for something I can't remember among rows of collards and tomatoes I wanted him to see, because a boy will show off for his dad even after he is a man. The sun burned on, and I got a tad nervous about digging once I caught the tail end of a snake, or thought I did, as I pulled up clumps of black earth with my bare hands, still less wrinkled than his. I can't remember why I would have my daddy bent in the dirt, digging like a mammal with me, because he stopped to wipe his forehead with the back of his sweaty forearm and said, "I suppose you think you could have done everything without me being hard to you," and went silent as if to acknowledge I had any perspective at all on my early life as it relates to his cracked, clayed hands that hit whomever had a heartbeat in his house, the first one I ever called home. I don't remember a thing after that silence, and very little from before. Have I eaten today? Yesterday? Did I ever eat, or am I a hunger growing food that can't satisfy me? I am bereft, but must have guided him up when he finally stood again, and I do know neither of us cried. God is in the ground, which is where the living go when they die. That old man can't make me cry no more, no more. Lenoir. My uncles are the tallest men I know. Every doorway a chance to bow their heads. They love the Lord. Skin so dark their last name is Lenoir. Imagine growing up black in Louisiana with a name that French, but only able to pass for night. By the time each one hits 13, he's picked enough cotton for me to think of blisters when I wear a new shirt. At 14, he thinks of 6 feet with nostalgia. When I was small, I'd walk those fields with them in that sun. I'd tilt and tilt my head to find their faces, but end up blinded. Too much light around the darkness up there. I saw women see them. I'd see women quake. I didn't understand that my uncles were not gods. None of them seemed to fit in a chair. I mean, I don't think they ever relaxed. Some men are so black you can't see them, or you can't bear to look out of fear of not measuring up. I'm only half an inch over 6 feet. I am what this century calls a man. When you think your job is to look out for your baby sister, you show her kids how to look out for themselves. My baby sister has no kids. My uncles tell great stories. The black man is always the hero. When one dies, we speak of him in present tense. One gets murdered in Vietnam. One gets shot on Madison Avenue. One elected city councilman, a principal, a deacon, a yellow school bus driver with bone cancer, a man with more wives than children, a deacon, a man with more children than he can remember, a mason, a deacon. I should mention the mean things they did. No grave is deep enough. A black man is always the hero. He will walk you to the edge of a field, squat close so you can hear him, and point, saying everything your grandfather planted, everything his children reaped. All this is yours. You have to grow into it. Your legs stretching out along the floor and farther beyond as you fall asleep in the best chair you got. This next poem, the first line of this next poem is from a very famous poem by a very famous poet whose name will also come up at some point in this poem. Black Dictionary. I turned myself into myself and was Jesus. I turned Jesus into a business and was the pastor of a mega church. I turned the church out. I'm Whitney Houston. I'm Sam Cooke. I got a squall on me. You want to see where it comes from. I am black and comely. I am come to send fire on the earth, not to send peace, but a sword, my sword. All the myths are only as true as one woman can be to another. It's true. I'm so fine. You already know what I look like naked. You dream it every night. Everybody's a clock, but I'm Jesse Owens. I got no respect for a stopwatch. I got no respect for a stop sign. I invented the traffic light. I am the light of the world when the sun shines and the people of California breathe air unsullied. I invented the gas mask. I keep you safe. I invented the home security system so you think you're safe from me. I am the sanctity of marriage for the man black enough to have me. We take turns turning each other over. I am broader than any idea of myself and as specific as a word Nikki Giovanni wrote. Thinking of me, she thought of me before I was born and before she lied down like a road that turns away from us toward the hills of Blacksburg and on into the mountains where even literacy can get lost. What am I to call myself now? Who has a word when I want to be what she saw in me? I turned myself into a question and became an orphan in a black suit. I turned from my mourning to the pages of our family's big black dictionary. Orphaned too, now that everyone's got a smartphone. I turned my phone off so I could hear. She thought I could do anything, go fishing, be the black rod and the black hook that catches and feeds the multitude. I turned myself into Jesus, but can't seem to raise the dead. The unrequited. Some sing, some cook, some buy you high-end shoes, but I tell a good story to prove it. I swear I'm your biggest fool. I was a grown man in my own home when I stopped using mustard. By that time, I had knives. I wasn't stealing plasticware from Wendy's. I spread mustard on my sandwiches because my dad spread mustard on his sandwiches. How am I to distinguish myself when I stand in such a long line of men? I don't mean to offend, but I hate mustard. Can't you taste how gaudy it is, and when it stains, throw the whole shirt away? Or use it to wipe your runny nose. I don't know what else I do because my dad did it. I don't know what else I hate and do. I fear I could leave a yellow stain on you. Of course, you don't love us. We look like our fathers. This next poem is about a singer who I had a very I had a very special relationship to when I was a kid because I just really liked the way he danced, and dancing was very important. It was also very important that when other kids met me, that I know the latest dances, and he had this body roll that I just thought was, y'all know, he was so good, and he could do it like on one leg. It was just great, and so I would practice this, and so this is a poem. About how I think of him now. I should also say that later in his life, he married a woman who was probably the greatest singer to ever live. Reunion tour. I like seeing him sweat now. I like how he leans on a speaker, winded, while Ralph, Johnny, Ronnie, Ricky, and Mike do the dances that made them their money. I like how round Bobby Brown is. I dream rubbing his belly the way a bad man rubs a lamp, desperate for a genie. Everyone who rubs the belly of Bobby Brown ends up pregnant. 5 of his 7 kids live. I think he must be sadder than I'll ever be. You can't replace a child. But what do I know? I'm no father, no husband. When you look at me, you can't tell the body of someone I loved rots like any other under the Fairview Cemetery in Westfield, New Jersey. I've joined the mass. We run up the arena steps to seats we won't use. Bobby sounds better than before. It's as if he inherited a gift someone had to die for him to use. I don't think there's anything I have to explain. There are references, but I think they're known. Track 6, Who's Making Love? Johnny Taylor had one wife and a good few other women too, with 9 children among them to prove he could do what he crooned, songs that give advice to the wrong and tips on wrongdoing, songs that tempt in me a love for the streets I once walked, traces of the yellow that divides traffic still beneath my shoes. When I hear him, I see him sweat in my mind where secrets get drenched by the sound of all that's low down. I miss his jerry curl, wet as a bad girl, and those shiny zebra print suits. I miss my aunts pinching at their skirts so no hymn swept the floor back when he'd squall from the radio, and I thought of them as old. Way before they were old. A few of them so old, they're dead. I'm glad I was too young to go out with them on Saturday night, given how much they'd cry come Sunday in church. And sometimes I miss what I was too, a boy you couldn't hurt, in danger of becoming a man you can't hinder, because he thought what dignity there was had already been taken. The blues that made me the man I used to be, skinny as a sleeve with teeth crooked and stacked like a poorly kept record collection. And whenever you couldn't tell what your lover was thinking, your lover was thinking of me. Arnold Rampersad he's the biographer of many very impactful and historical African-American male figures, including Ralph Ellison, but he's most known as the biographer for Langston Hughes. And of course, Langston Hughes is Langston Hughes. Proof. Sometimes I think about Arnold Rampersad saying aloud to himself, "Not my Langston," when he discovered Hughes once had gonorrhea. The thought enters my mind and wanders around, then leaves like it's got nowhere in me to rest. I wonder who else it finds before it makes its rounds back to me. Little homeless memory, thin nomad of thought. I can't care what people think I am, but I wonder who he thought I was. Who do you have to be to hear the truth in a Trinidadian accent? Gonorrhea and syphilis, words that sound like the names of cities in the Bible. Chlamydia and gonorrhea, words that sound like the names of women in the Bible. The whore they tried to stone washed her hero's feet with her very long hair. She wanted him as clean as his eye perceived her to be, though she never thought him sullied. We are talking about a man who walked everywhere he went. You can love a man's mind before you meet him. I can prove it. I am proof. When we say she loved him, we mean she loved his dirty feet. Duplex. I still believe in God. What else keeps me from slaughter? Who else holds the butcher's hand? Sweet slaughter, though I'd pray, give me butcher's hands. Matthew baked me cake as if I could be saved. He baked spice cake, humming, as if we were saved, as if this weren't the land of milk and money. We can't survive this nation of white money, says the black man as his excuse for malice. What black man needs an excuse for malice? Why mask the salt? No sugar is that sweet. My pressure's high. No sugar could make me sweet if he came back today, if he forgave me. Since he won't come back, won't forgive me, I believe in God. Who else would keep me? Retinol is an ingredient used in facial products. It helps to close pores and overall keeps you looking young. And it did not exist when I was in high school. Like, you couldn't just get retinol. But when you could, it changed my life. Retinol. Ain't nobody got to tell me I look good because I'm the kind of single who knows my man might drop his keys where I pass as an excuse to block the way and freeze me into a scene he can see just that much longer. However we meet, he won't be confused. I know I look good because when I do meet my man, he'll think me so sharp, he'll ask my name, handing me those keys. Ain't nobody got to tell me I'm fine but him, and I'll know him, not by his nosebleed penthouse nor his oddly shaped Bugatti, but by how he looks at me like I'm water or like I'm meat hanging in the freezer, and he's the butcher and the chef and his own patient dinner guest. Looks ain't everything in this roomy penthouse high above the unhoused, and money ain't either. My man wants me to want what's best for me, so he imagines I've been waiting on a Stairmaster or in the middle of the hardest part of the 100th push-up. He thinks well of himself enough to believe I defy gravity Age ain't nothing but digits. What are digits on a stopped watch? We ain't met yet, but we're so fine. Every day we are black men, the first 24 hours after a haircut. You can't tell us nothing. We walk into possibly separate gyms in track shorts on the darkest day of winter. We keep retinol in the fridge. I'm so glad y'all are laughing. I'm trying to write funny, you know. This is my final poem. And this is probably the first poem I wrote after my last book, but, you know, it's still new because it's not in a book. Say thank you, say I'm sorry. I don't know whose side you're on, but I am here for the people who work in grocery stores that glow in the morning and close down for deep cleaning at night, right up the street and in cities I mispronounce, in towns too tiny for my big black car to quit, and in every wide corner of Kansas where going to school means at least one field trip to a slaughterhouse. I want so little, another leather-bound book, a gimlet with a lavender gin, bread so good when I taste it, I can tell you how it's made. I'd like us to rethink what it is to be a nation. I'm in a mood about America today. I have PTSD about the Lord. God, save the people who work in grocery stores. They know a bit of glamour is a lot of glamour. They know how much it costs for the eldest of us to eat. Save my loves and not my sentences. Before I see them, I draw a mole near my left dimple. Add flair to the smile they can't see behind my mask. I grin or lie, or maybe I wear the mouth of a beast. I eat wild animals while some of us grow up knowing what gnocchi is. The people who work at the grocery don't care. They say thank you. They say sorry. We don't sell motor oil anymore. With a grief so thick you could touch it. Go on, touch it. It is early. It is late. They have washed their hands. They have washed their hands for you. And they take the bus home.
You won again.
Thank you. You're so kind. Thank you, Claudia.
I'm not kind. I'm truthful.
That's true, too. That's true, too. Maybe I can sit here.
You sit there, I sit here.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to ask Jericho a couple questions, and then I'm going to, because I am a generous person, I am going to let you ask Jericho a couple of questions. So, as I was listening to you, I was thinking that you're sort of a black encyclopedia.
Oh.
The references are both high and low culture, media, literary, political. It's the whole shebang. And so it got me to thinking, when you are working, people ask me this all the time, and I never really think that the answer is anyone. But do you think of yourself writing towards Black America?
I think, yes, but not consciously. I mean, I guess there must be a black writer who's not writing toward Black America, and I wish them well. Actually, I could think of somebody's name right now. Anyway, but I can think of two people's names. Anyway, because, I don't like their poems. But so I think it's a good idea I think it's a good idea to be making use of of everything that I have. And obviously, everything I have includes the fact that I am a Black American, and that my audience will be all that is me. So my audience will be queer, or the queer people will see certain things. Do you know what I mean? My audience will be Black, and the Black people know certain things just because they're Black. And it's also really interesting that I am more and more aware of myself as a person who wants to know what's going on or what has happened just because a Black thing has happened or is going on, because it's not as easy to keep up as it used to be. I remember at the advent of hip hop, when I was a very young person, it was clear to me I need to know, although it wasn't really my favorite genre. I mean, I really loved R&B. And when the music started going toward hip hop, I was like, there's no way I'm gonna be able to hold this, all of this and all of that in my head. And yet it seemed like my responsibility. And I imagine that I think of that as my responsibility as a poet, but I don't think that's every Black person's responsibility as a poet. I do think that it's a good idea to be using everything you have, though. And the more you know, I mean, if you're Black, I mean, you know, you don't really have to be Black, but the more you know about Black people, the more you have to put in your poems, the more it. The thing about knowledge and experience, as far as I'm concerned, is that the more of it that you have, the more knowledge, the more you get your heart broken, the more you break hearts, then you have more that can come up when you're in the midst of writing poems. And so if you have an idea of who Nikki Giovanni is and how she wrote, then you can have an idea that will come up in a poem that makes use of her and how she wrote.
Yes.
Yes, yes.
Yes. What about, I'm trying to think how to ask this question, and then I'll let you ask the question. In all of your books and in these new poems as well, this might not be the right way to say this, but there is a sense that I often get that you are recouping Black maleness, like not in a way that doesn't hold its complexity, but recognizing it intentionally. In Lenore, for example, with the uncles, or Bobby Brown in his relation to Whitney Houston, or the Crips and the Bloods. And so it's another way of thinking about the same question, but does consciousness and unconsciousness meet in that project?
Part of what I was asked to do here today had to do with biography. And I was sort of thinking, obviously, about the men that I end up writing about, a lot of men, including Johnny Taylor and Bobby Brown, my uncles, the Lenoirs. And so I was wondering if I could put the poems I tried to put together were poems that would show, it's sort of, for me, in a third person kind of way, who is Jericho Brown if we only see him in his interactions with men? And so I'm very conscious of that as an interest, though I might not be conscious of it when I'm writing poems. I know it can come up, and when it comes up, that's a good thing. I can push toward whatever language is calling that forth. But I'm interested in what happens in rooms where there are only men, and in particular in rooms, I have to say, in rooms where there are only men, whether they are queer or not. Like, what's the difference? Do you know what I mean? And is there a way that I can somehow map or reflect that difference in poems? And this is something actually people will always say this about my work, that it's sort of investigating masculinity, et cetera, and I never knew what that meant. But I would say, okay, give me the money. Write that review. That's right. Do y'all know what I mean? Like, you read things about your work over and over again. And so I got to a point where I was like, well, maybe I should figure out what that's about. And so lately I've been paying a different kind of attention to it. And I think it's sort of right on time, because the other thing that I've been paying attention to, which I think is a balance, there's something about that seems to always lead to something that is very dark for me. But I've also been trying to work on what appears to be a very comic element in my poems. There's a great deal of humor that comes up now in a way that it did not before, such that I don't even know necessarily how to read the poems out loud. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's a way, before, when there was a joke in a poem, it'll be, sort of this thing that was kind of funny in a poem, and people would look at me kind of nervously like, this poem is really sad. What do you want me to do right now? And then somebody would laugh, and then somebody else would look at them like, girl, don't laugh. Which is always very funny, and you can sort of get by it. But I do have this belief that a poem, it should be like our lives. And our lives are not all good, not all bad, not all sad, not all funny. They're all of those things at once, And so I imagine that I always imagined my poems would have some element of humor. And so I'm sort of trying to expand that with this sense that if I write poems that get into a world that is comic, I can access joy in a different way as I am writing. And I just have personally needed that kind of access quite lately in the circumstance we call the United States. And then I think over time, that feeling, I can sort of walk around. I mean, the more I know a poem, the more I'm working on a poem. Even now, when I was reading these poems, I realized, oh, this is not the version I meant to read. So, the more I know my poems and the more I'm clear on which version to print, then the more I can deliver in that vein where something about my voice is connected to the fact of my being, and then also send that out to the ear of the person hearing. Yeah.
Does that connect to the fact that you began as a speechwriter?
I think I got to be a speechwriter because I could do that. I could do that better than I could in poems when I was writing speeches. I mean, when I was a speechwriter, I was getting an MFA at the same time. And then when I met you, I was getting a PhD. So there's something about that appearing in my poems that I had to learn poetry in order to be able to make use of or channel that. But I always had that when I was writing speeches, which is why the mayor, I used to be a speechwriter for Mark Morial, who was the mayor of New Orleans, which is why he was interested in me doing the job. He said I always made him sound like he was telling the truth, which I found really an interesting thing. I was not, and it was so funny because I had typed the speech, and he would say it a lot. He was like, I like you, Nelson. You make me sound like I'm telling the truth. But he was, as far as I knew, he was. So it was very strange to hear him say that. I knew it was a compliment, but I was like, wow.
Questions? And then I'll come back there.
Thank you. What you said about the Black church made me think about this because there are so many spaces in which you encounter this kind of fear of poetry, even amongst writers, sometimes poets themselves, sometimes writers in other genres, who feel like poetry is this mysterious, out-of-reach thing. And reflecting on that and responding to that, I find myself also as a Black American raised in the Black church, not really understanding it and feeling like poetry is something that has just been part of life and naturalized in this way. And so I wondered if you could speak to that, to your own journey towards poetry and what you find familiar or unfamiliar in it.
Yeah, I think if it's okay with you, I just want to relate to everyone when I say the black church, particularly in the United States, maybe somewhere else too, and I just don't know it. But part of that thing about having young people speak and not allowing them to be shy included the recitation of poetry right along with the recitation of scripture. And so you could, on any given Sunday, go to church and see a 10-year-old girl reciting Phenomenal Woman. Do y'all know what I mean? Or anybody of any age reciting The Negro Speaks of Rivers, or I Too Sing America by Langston Hughes, or Ego Trippin' by Nikki Giovanni, or Still I Rise by Maya Angelou, or We Wear the Mask, Paul Lawrence Dunbar. I mean, black poetry was in the church in a way that it set right alongside scripture. It was also, I have to say this, the way in which, another way, I mean, this happened through the music, obviously, but it was yet another way that that black queerness infiltrated the black church. You would see on certain days, if it's February and it's, the first Sunday of February, somebody might recite a paragraph of James Baldwin. Do y'all understand what I mean? So there's a great deal of learning the world through the lens of blackness in the fact of the church, because the church was a space of religion, obviously, but also a space of resistance. And quite literally, when I say a space of resistance, it's where people met when they needed to meet, and it was supposed to be a safe place, although it always wasn't a safe place. As we know, churches would get blown up, particularly in the 1960s and 70s. The pastor of my church, for instance, got beat within an inch of his life. The police marched, rode horses into our church, and beat everybody up one weeknight that a meeting was happening. And so that kind of a thing puts you in a position where you don't think of poetry as separate. Like, I didn't know that poetry was a marginal art. And I grew up, I'm old enough, I think it's sort of strange now, but when I grew up, there were poems in schools. And so I just thought poems were the greatest thing ever. And it was clear, also, I have to mention this, it must have been clear to my teachers, who were not always black. I was in elementary school when Rita Dove won the Pulitzer Prize, and every time I saw a different, when I was in elementary school, every time my teacher in my class, but every teacher I saw, like going to lunch, coming back, going to recess, coming back, the day Rita Dove won the Pulitzer Prize, every teacher I saw pulled me to the side and told me, Rita Dove won the Pulitzer Prize. I was like, okay. And then I had to figure out they were telling me that because she was black. Do y'all know what I mean? So, and obviously I had given them some sense that I liked poetry, or that I was a poet, or would be maybe. And so I think that is part of the reason why I didn't come to poetry with any prejudice against it. And I'm always surprised by people's confusion. When they encounter it, because there didn't seem to be confusion before, so it's interesting. It's interesting to me.
There's a question back there. Yeah. Hello. Thank you for everything you've shared and the way that you share, especially. This question is none of my business, so feel free to not share. I love it. But I just really found myself wondering, have you and your parents, especially your father, been able to talk about the content of your poetry?
No, I mean, it's just not, I don't know, he's special, he's just so special, bless him. He's just, he's got his thing. He just has his thing, and I love him so much. And there was a time in my life, I don't know, maybe it's therapy or maybe it's just age, where I really thought it was me and that I could get to somewhere that, like, I wouldn't be a problem for him. And then I just had to realize, I was probably somewhere in my 40s, maybe I was in my 30s, but not, I mean, I don't think I really got it until very recently in my life. I mean, it's a good thing about good things happening. Good things happening let me know, that my dad he's got a problem, and I don't have the pills necessary. Like I don't have the degree. Do you know what I mean? Like there's something he needs and I can't. I'll give you an example. I did the commencement speech Saturday at my alma mater, Dillard University, an HBCU in New Orleans, Louisiana. It was very exciting, for me to be able to do that. And I think I did okay. People were standing up, and I got an honorary degree. I mean, it was, a thing, and a lot of people, from my from undergrad and even high school came to see me do it. It was a big thing. My dad really insisted on, he really wanted to be there. He's sort of that way. He does want to be there. And he, so I got him a ride there. I rented a van so my cousin could drive him because he can't really drive at night he can't really drive anymore, especially long distances, but that's another story. And I got him a hotel and I fed everybody and he came. And then after the speech, I was trying to introduce him to people, and he was sort of standing away from me. And and then so I pulled him over, and then he said to me, I feel like one day maybe you could be a college president too. And he didn't say anything else about the entire day. Anybody else say that you know what I mean? So, and I had to realize, when I was a younger person, that would have broken my heart for me, and I would have been like, oh, how do I do that better? Do you know what I mean? And now I'm just like that's like what's wrong with you, bro? Like, are you crazy? Like, and it just makes me, thinking about, I'm not gonna cry, but thinking about it just makes me so sad for him, But yeah.
Well, I think sadness is a place to end, right?
Yeah, sure. Sure, sadness is a place to end. I think there's like an emergency.
Is there an
question.
emergency question? All
I
right,
love
go.
An emergency. Then we won't end on sadness, I promise.
Right, okay, all right.
Should be on? Okay, sorry, I was in the back, maybe that's why. Thank you for your presence and reading, and for reading your new work. Both of you teach, and therefore are often in the position of the mentor. I also have to think of your compilation, how we do it. And I feel like this compilation does play a similar role of being a mentor for people who want to write. Were there moments, people, or books that encouraged you to continue your craft, to develop and grow as a writer, despite the hardships and maybe moments of self-doubt?
Yes, I gotta say, I think that book is the best thing I ever did, man. I'm so glad you mentioned it. It's a book called How We Do It, and it's a craft. It's a book of essays on craft, completely. All the essays are by Black writers. Tiffany Yannick is in it, for instance, and it's. I'm just so glad I made it. I wanted to make a book. Whenever I'm writing, I'm thinking about this question of mentorship is so interesting because there's a way, and others of you probably have, everybody in here is some kind of an artist. You've had this experience where you're trying to make the thing you needed when you were 19, or make the thing you needed when you were ready to kill yourself, or make the thing do you know what I mean? And I always want to write the poems that I wish were in the library. I always want to write the poems I wish were in the bookstore. They're not there, so I got to make them. Do you know what I'm saying? And so that book sort of provided that opportunity for me. And it was I love doing it because I like the instructions we gave to those who wrote for it were that they had to quite literally tell us, how did you do it? You can't just, explicate. You got to tell us how, like give us the secret, which I really appreciated. Everybody giving us their secrets. And I'll say that I mentioned this to Logan. yesterday, and she's been on my mind a great deal, and so I should say it here. You know, one of the best pieces of encouragement I ever got was from Gwendolyn Brooks, and it came in the form of 2 questions. She came to my undergraduate school. She gave a reading, and people thought I was smart, so they let me sit next to her for the dinner. And in the middle of the dinner, after the reading, she turned to me, and out of absolutely nowhere, she said, "So what is your conception of the line?" And of course, I had no answer to that question. And I said, "What?" And she then told me her conception of the line and how it had changed over her life. And she sort of did it book by book. Well, I was thinking a line was this, but by the time I published this, I was like, what is this lady talking about? And then she started talking about other writers and their conception of the line. She's the first person from whom I ever heard the phrase Whitmanian line or Dickinsonian line. So she just was telling me this stuff. And then the second question was, there was this new anthology, at that time, new anthology that had come out. And she said, "Have you read Henry Louis Gates's new anthology of African-American poetry?" And I said, "No, ma'am." I was 19. Y'all know what I'm saying? It's like, "No, ma'am, I have not." And she's like asking me my conception of it. I was like, "Girl, what?" And she said, and I said, "No, I haven't. I've never, I haven't read that yet." And she said, and then she started talking about the book and who was included in the book and who was not included in the book. And then she started telling me about reviews of the book and what different people were saying about it. And then she said, "Well, here's what I think about the book." And then she said, "They included these poems by me, and I'm glad they included these, but I wonder why they didn't include these." She was just like, and I realized while she was doing this, she was trying to tell me how to be, what I would have to know that I might want to read and that I might want a conception of the line. Do you know what I'm saying? And the best part of this story is that, and she was like this. And I don't know how she did it. When you're a kid in school, you check, maybe not anymore, but it was a big deal to get mail. And if you got mail, all the other students at the school, there was one place where everybody went and people would see that you had mail. And so they would all gather around you like, "What'd you get?" If you got a package, and I got a package. And she had sent me that anthology and she signed it. And do you know, I read that book and it was this thick and I was 19. And I was like, "Girl, if you send me this book, I bet you're not gonna," and I think that is the moment. I was always a reader of poetry, but that is the moment that I really said, "Hey, I'm going to read everything. I'm just going to read everything." And so I went about life trying to, because I imagined that Gwendolyn Brooks wanted me to.
All right.